Ah, Tudor England, where the only thing more dangerous than plague rats was your reputation in the bedroom. Forget Netflix scandals. These folks were starring in their own reality show, Keeping Up with the Tudors, except the stakes were prison, exile, or, oops, beheading. Before we dive into the royal bedchambers, smash that subscribe button like Henry VIII smashing through yet another marriage contract, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and at what ungodly hour? Midnight gossip binge or early morning history fix? Let's set the stage. The Tudor dynasty kicks off in 1485 with Henry VII grabbing the crown after a battle that makes Game of Thrones look like a pillow fight. But forget the swords. What people whispered about was what went on behind velvet curtains. First, you need to understand, Tudor England treated sex like it was both the greatest sin and the hottest ticket in town. Priests thundered from pulpits about chastity, while nobles commissioned cheeky ballads and woodcuts depicting their hunting expeditions. Think of it as medieval hypocrisy with extra embroidery. Take courtship. Today, we've got Tinder swipes. Back then, they had wooing gifts, jewelry, silken gloves, even fruit. Yes, handing someone a pomegranate could mean, "I'd like to see you without your ruff, my lady." Saucy, definitely. Subtle? Not at all. And then there were the marriage beds. In theory, every union was supposed to be blessed, consummated, and ideally produce heirs faster than Netflix produces spin-offs. But here's the twist. Tudor law required witnesses for some royal consummations. Yes, you heard me. Imagine your wedding night looking more like a live studio audience taping than a private affair. Guests didn't exactly sit with popcorn, but they did hang around to verify the deed. Talk about awkward performance pressure. Of course, the Tudors also had, let's call them creative loopholes. Courtiers whispered about bundling, young couples allowed to share a bed while fully clothed, separated by a board. Supposedly innocent, but the results often said otherwise. Pamphlets circulated mocking how bundled girls suddenly needed quick marriages 9 months later. Then there's the ultimate Tudor celebrity, Henry VIII. His bedroom gossip could fill entire seasons of a scandal podcast. 6 wives, countless mistresses, and enough annulments to make your divorce lawyer rich. Chroniclers couldn't write fast enough, and pamphlets lampooned him as a man who loved marriage as much as he loved breaking it. The irony? For all the drama, Henry was obsessed with being seen as virtuous. It's like if a modern influencer preached clean living while secretly binging tequila shots every night. Meanwhile, the common folk weren't exactly sane.
Village festivals often turned into flirtation carnivals. Picture May Day celebrations, bonfires, dancing, a little too much ale, and suddenly, chastity became as mythical as unicorns. Local officials frequently fined unmarried mothers, but the fines didn't stop the pregnancies. Instead, bawdy ballads mocked officials for trying to police what clearly couldn't be policed. Even religion couldn't escape the scandal. While monasteries preached purity, rumors swirled of monks and nuns caught in compromising situations. Pamphlets gleefully painted lurid tales, some true, some wildly exaggerated. Imagine a Tudor tabloid, friar caught in barn with baker's daughter, sold like hotcakes. So whether you were royalty with too many witnesses or a farmer's daughter sneaking off during May Day, sex in Tudor England was a delicious contradiction. Public enough to be everybody's business, private enough to ruin your life if the wrong person found out. And that, my friends, is just the opening act. If you thought this was spicy, wait until we peel back the layers of Henry VIII's marital disasters. Spoiler, it's less happily ever after and more beheading optional. Now let's turn from the polished halls of power to the bedrooms and backstreets of Tudor England, where propriety was preached louder than a church sermon, yet broken faster than a tavern oath. One of the most eyebrow-raising practices of this age was bundling. Yes, believe it or not, entire villages encouraged young couples to test their willpower by sharing a bed fully clothed, separated only by a wooden board or heavy blanket. Supposedly innocent, but let's be honest, when has dim candlelight, nervous giggling, and teenage hormones ever ended in pure chastity? In the royal courts, things were no less bizarre. Ladies of the court carried not just fans and jewels, but also small handwritten charms, little spells meant to enhance passion or bind loyalty. If your lover's attention wandered, you didn't just pout, you tied a knot in a ribbon, whispered a few choice words, and suddenly half the court thought sorcery was the blame for every hickey. By 1540, gossip pamphlets accused noblewomen of turning more to witchcraft than prayer, which, ironically, didn't stop their male counterparts from begging for those enchanted ribbons. Meanwhile, the clergy wasn't immune to scandal either. Despite oaths of celibacy, parish priests were frequently caught with housekeepers who were suspiciously young and lived in suspiciously private chambers. Court records show townspeople snickering openly about the hypocrisy. Satirical woodcuts portrayed priests carrying prayer books in one hand and scandalous love letters in the other. It was Tudor Twitter, but carved in wood and passed around at the market. Then, of course, there was the medical side of things. Physicians of the Tudor era believed that sexual activity could balance humors. A good tumble, they argued, was just as important as eating vegetables or bleeding a vein. Treatments for infertility included bizarre concoctions of herbs, ale, and sometimes, brace yourself, animal organs. Imagine being told by your doctor, "Yes, sir, rub this deer testicle ointment on your wife's belly. Conception is practically guaranteed." Little wonder people sometimes preferred charms and prayers. Among the gentry, erotic poetry circulated under the table. Courtiers like Sir Thomas Wyatt laced verses with double entendres so spicy they'd make modern rap look tame. Lovers exchanged these poems like we send late-night texts today, though with ink blots instead of emojis. Some were even read aloud in private salons where women pretended to fan themselves demurely while memorizing every sultry stanza. And let's not forget the Tudor obsession with astrology. Court astrologers made a small fortune predicting when was the most auspicious time for coupling. According to some, if Venus was favorably aligned, even the most tired nobleman could perform like Mars. On unlucky days, well, better to play cards. The irony, of course, is that all this unfolded in a society loudly proclaiming virtue and religious devotion. Yet beneath the layers of brocade and sermons, lust was as common as ale at a tavern and twice as intoxicating. So, whether it was enchanted ribbons, deer testicle ointments, or priests with very suspicious housekeepers, Tudor England proved that scandal was just another form of entertainment, long before Netflix. In Tudor England, sex wasn't just a pastime, it was practically a political weapon. Forget spy agencies, the Tudors had a much steamier intelligence service, pillow talk. Court beds were less about sleeping and more about collecting dirt. The gossip that spilled from boudoirs could make or break alliances faster than a sword fight. Honestly, if WhatsApp groups had existed back then, half the court would have been impeached before dessert. And one of the juiciest scandals involved Henry VIII's court itself. You see, courtiers weren't just serving food, they were serving themselves to anyone with the right title. Affairs weren't whispered, they were practically broadcast with a wink and a nudge. Ambitious ladies-in-waiting often found themselves advancing via the king's bedchamber or those of his closest friends. And before you judge, remember, when your entire family's future depended on you charming a man with the table manners of a walrus, you'd probably flirt too. And then there were the spies. Yes, spies of the bedchamber. Women like Anne Boleyn didn't just flutter their eyelashes for romance. They calculated every glance like a chess move. Courtiers noted who lingered near which bed, who slipped behind which curtain, and whether the candles burned a little too long. Even Henry himself grew paranoid, accusing wives and friends of treachery whenever whispers grew too loud. Of course, considering his track record of chopping off heads, those whispers weren't just gossip,
They were death sentences in the making. Meanwhile, the clergy, oh the clergy, officially celibate, unofficially busier than a brothel on payday. Priests fathered children, bishops kept mistresses, and abbots threw holy feasts that were anything but pious. The Reformation only added fuel to the fire. Reformers gleefully published exposés about priests caught in flagrante, monks sneaking out at night, and nuns rediscovering freedom in very earthly ways. Imagine the Protestant Reformation as one long Twitter thread dragging the Catholic Church for every scandal it could find. But even in the shadows, Tudor society found room for creativity. Masquerades crept into England, imported from Italy, with masks that allowed nobles to flirt, kiss, or worse, without fear of being recognized. Of course, recognition always came eventually. The perfume gave it away. Nothing killed a secret faster than smelling of lavender when you swore you'd been at prayer. And don't forget the prisons. Yes, prisons. While nobles feared them, many lower-class lovers used them as illicit rendezvous points. Bribes to guards, whispered promises through iron bars, it was practically Shakespearean, minus the poetry. Some even claimed prison weddings occurred, though whether they ended in passion or plague is anyone's guess. By the late Tudor period, scandals had become so routine that pamphleteers grew bolder. They didn't just target nameless courtiers anymore, they went after queens, bishops, even the king himself. Elizabeth I was accused of everything from secret marriages to torrid affairs with courtiers young enough to be her grandsons. Were these true? Almost certainly not, but they made excellent gossip, and gossip was currency in Tudor England. In short, Tudor sex was never just about sex. It was politics, survival, and entertainment rolled into one. A slip of the tongue or of the dress could topple reputations, fuel revolutions, or end at the executioner's block. So next time someone tells you that Tudors were all ruffs, roses, and royal banquets, remind them the real Tudor Game of Thrones wasn't on the battlefield, it was in the bedroom. If Tudor bedrooms could talk, they'd probably need their own royal censor. By the mid-1500s, things had escalated from candlelit flirtations to full-blown courtroom dramas featuring sheets, midwives, and sworn testimonies about who touched what and when. And remember, this wasn't just gossip, it was state business. Henry VIII's marital escapades alone generated more paperwork than half his wars combined. Take the infamous virginity tests. Imagine being a lady-in-waiting and your boss, the Queen of England, orders you to confirm if some poor girl is pure enough to marry into the royal family. Forget Netflix drama. This was real-time humiliation with political stakes. Physicians and matrons lined up like grim judges, declaring verdicts on bodies as though they were handing out theater reviews. 5 stars? She's marriage material. 1 star? Exile to a convent. And oh, the scandalous poetry. Court poets, often funded by wealthy patrons, didn't hold back when it came to slipping in body references under flowery metaphors. A sonnet might look saintly at first glance, but peel back the lace and it's describing anatomy with all the subtlety of a tavern ballad. Nobles would pass these poems around like forbidden TikToks, giggling while pretending to discuss theology.
Meanwhile, prostitution in London was both a booming business and a moral panic. Southwark, just across the Thames, was basically Tudor Vegas. Brothels were officially tolerated for a time until the church decided that God was apparently tired of fun. The Bishop of Winchester even licensed some of the brothels, leading locals to nickname the sex workers Winchester geese. And yet, when outbreaks of disease struck, guess who got blamed? Not the noble clients, but the women themselves, often thrown into the Bridewell prison. Hypocrisy. Thy name is Tudor England. And then came the public shaming rituals. Adulterers might be dragged through the streets wearing only a paper hat announcing their sin, basically the Renaissance version of being doxxed online. Neighbors hurled insults, rotten vegetables, or worse.
The entire town turned out because apparently there was no better entertainment than watching someone else's marital collapse paraded in broad daylight. But the prize for most bizarre custom? Court masks, lavish masked performances that started as innocent allegories but ended in wild after-parties. Under candlelight, with anonymity guaranteed, lords and ladies could mingle, flirt, or sneak off without fear of immediate recognition. It was Tinder, but with more velvet and higher candle wax bills. Rumors of what happened behind the curtains fueled pamphlets for months, each tale more outrageous than the last. By the late Tudor era, things were looking less like Shakespearean romance and more like a soap opera with codpieces. Everyone from queens to chambermaids had played their parts in the grand theater of scandal. And honestly, Netflix could never. Henry VIII's ghost probably paced through Hampton Court, rolling his eyes as Elizabeth's courtiers staged their own bedroom intrigues. The man who chopped off wives for sport would have been horrified to see lovers now merely gossiping in bed rather than losing their heads. Talk about progress. Elizabeth I, of course, gave the world her Virgin Queen branding, basically the 16th century version of an Instagram bio. And like every influencer, her followers were divided. Some swore she was the picture of chastity, others whispered that her chambers were busier than a modern dating app. Letters, pamphlets, and portraits all tried to decode her virtue, while enemies gleefully hinted she'd entertained more than just ambassadors.
Virgin or not, one thing's certain. Elizabeth mastered the art of PR centuries before TikTok hacks. Meanwhile, the nobility found increasingly creative ways to disguise their desires. Disguises, role play, even coded poetry passed through courtly hands. It was Tinder but with riddles. Aristocrats disguised as shepherds in masks, duchesses as nymphs in masked revels. And yes, more than one scandalous assignation under the watchful gaze of an oil painting of some disapproving ancestor. Imagine swiping right, only to find your match quoting Petrarch before propositioning you in Latin. Sexy? Maybe. Confusing? Absolutely. But the crown jewel of Tudor scandal was how politics and passion constantly collided. Secret marriages threatened alliances, mistresses carried messages between factions, and love affairs occasionally tipped the balance of power. Pillow talk in Tudor England wasn't just gossip, it was diplomacy. Whole policies may have turned on whether someone whispered sweet nothings or bitter insults before dawn. A mistress's sigh could make or break a lord's career. And of course, let's not forget the ordinary people. For every duchess sneaking into a gallery, there were hundreds of apprentices, tavern maids, and traveling players weaving their own erotic tales. The Tudors didn't invent scandal, but they certainly democratized it. From bawdy plays performed in taverns to ribald ballads sung on London Bridge, everyone got their share of sexual storytelling. It was less a monarchy, more a national group chat filled with innuendo. By the end of Elizabeth's reign, England was both exhausted and exhilarated. The official story was one of discipline, hierarchy, and virtue. But the unofficial one, well, it smelled of candle wax, sweat, and whispered secrets. If Henry VIII had left a legacy of chopped heads, Elizabeth left a legacy of rumor, innuendo, and carefully curated mystery. Both, in their own ways, proved that in Tudor England, power and pleasure were never far apart. So, next time you hear about Tudor glory, remember, behind the portraits of stern monarchs and stiff ruffs were people just as messy, scandalous, and lust-driven as any modern celebrity. Only difference? They had better codpieces and worse dental care.